A pitch-black night enveloped everything. The image of a three-eyed monster, drenched in fresh blood, glided like the wind through the village, spreading death in its wake. In just one night, 30 lives were ruthlessly taken. This horrifying crime is regarded as one of the most gruesome massacres in modern Japanese criminal history. The massacre unfolded on a seemingly tranquil late spring night just as summer approached. A 21-year-old man named Mutsuo Toi, with 2 flashlights strapped to his head, a large bicycle lamp fastened to his chest, a hunting rifle in hand, and a katana tucked at his waist, emerged as the harbinger of doom. He looked no different from a feral beast, moving swiftly through the narrow alleys between the villages of Kayomura and Hanponmura, knocking on one door after another. Behind those closed doors lay scenes of brutal slaughter. That night became one of the most terrifying in Japan's criminal history. This was the Tsuyama Massacre, a case that continues to haunt the memories of many. But what transformed Mutsuo Toi into such a merciless killer? To understand this tragedy, we must turn back time to 1917 and uncover a story steeped in sorrow. Okama, where our narrative begins, is located in the southwestern part of Honshu, Japan, within the Chugoku region. Boasting a well-developed transportation network and a stable climate, known as the Land of Sunshine, Okama enjoys many bright sunny days throughout the year. On March 5, 1917, Mutsuo Toi was born into a wealthy family in Limomura, Yamada District, Okayama Prefecture. His grandfather was a renowned and affluent landowner. His father, a gentleman, had served valiantly in the Russo-Japanese War. Mutsuo also had an older sister, Minako, who was 3 years his senior. The family lived in happiness and harmony, however. That joy was fleeting from the moment Mutsuo Toi entered the world. Misfortune struck the family in rapid succession. When he was just a year old, his grandfather passed away from tuberculosis. A mere 5 months later, his father also succumbed to the same devastating illness. The tragedy did not end there. In the following spring, when Mutsuo was just 2 years old, his mother also fell victim to tuberculosis and did not survive. Whispers began to circulate among the villagers, suggesting that Mutsuo was a cursed child, a harbinger of misfortune for his family. On top of this, with so many deaths attributed to tuberculosis, the Toi family was shunned and ostracized by the entire village. In 1920, when Mutsuo was 3 years old, he, his sister Minako, and their grandmother were ruthlessly expelled from their family clan. His uncle seized nearly all of their inheritance, leaving them with only a small portion of farmland and forest. From that moment on, the 3 of them had no choice but to rely on each other to survive. When Mutsuo turned 6, they relocated to his grandmother's hometown in the village of Kayomura. There, they purchased a house and some land, settling down for the long term. Compared to other villagers, their life was relatively comfortable. With his grandmother frequently working in the fields, Mutsuo spent most of his childhood playing with his sister. When the time came for him to start school, his grandmother used his frail health as an excuse to keep him at home. Mutsuo himself did not harbor a fondness for school either. However, after much persuasion from the villagers, his grandmother finally relented, allowing him to attend a school located 2.5 miles from their home. But due to the initial delay, Mutsuo began school a year later than his peers. In April 1924, at the age of 7, Mutsuo finally commenced his schooling, yet he was frequently absent for various reasons, skipping over a month each semester. His frequent absences were closely tied to his grandmother's excessive pampering. Not only did she spoil him, but she also kept him home whenever she could. Even the slightest rain or wind was sufficient for her to refuse to let him go to school. Despite his irregular attendance, Mutsuo excelled academically, consistently ranking at the top of his class. His teachers described him as diligent and ambitious, often assisting his classmates, and he even earned the position of class president. By the time he reached middle school, Mutsuo's impressive academic performance instilled hope in his teachers that he would continue his education. However, upon returning home, his ambitions were met with harsh reality. When Mutsuo Toi shared his aspirations of attending high school with his grandmother, her response was one of anger and dismissal. She believed the distance required him to live in a dormitory and felt her age rendered her too frail to support him. In just a few years, his sister Minako would marry, leaving her alone in the village with no one to look after her. This reality solidified her refusal to allow Mutsuo to pursue his studies away from home. Mutsuo's grandmother's steadfast refusal left him with no choice but to surrender his dreams. The following morning, he wearily informed his teachers that he would not pursue further education. In 1932, shortly after graduating from middle school, the 15-year-old began experiencing persistent fevers. A doctor diagnosed him with meningitis, advising him to avoid strenuous activities and rest at home. After enduring more than 3 months of treatment, his health improved, but soon after, Minako married, marking another blow to Mutsuo's fragile spirit. Mutsuo had shared a deep bond with his sister, who he regarded as his only true confidant. Now, with her marriage and the loss of his educational prospects, he faced a dual devastation. Overcome with grief, he withdrew from society, isolating himself within the confines of his home. As he cut ties with friends his age, he immersed himself in writing novels and adapting stories from newspapers. This newfound hobby endeared him to younger children in the village who appreciated his storytelling. In 1935, the Japanese government enacted the Youth School Ordinance, aimed at enhancing the educational standards across the nation. The ordinance offered vocational training for middle school graduates and introduced an examination system, promising good job prospects for those who succeeded. Remembering Mutsuo's past academic brilliance, a former teacher encouraged him to take the exams. Inspired by this encouragement, Mutsuo glimpsed a flicker of hope and resolve to do his best. Yet, an unforeseen encounter would irrevocably change the trajectory of his life. In the fall of 1935, while in Tsuyama City purchasing study materials, Mutsuo unexpectedly crossed paths with Yamuchi, an acquaintance from a previous visit to a movie theater. Yamuchi was anything but a respectable figure. He was entrenched in the seedy underbelly of Osaka's Ajikawa red light district, serving as a pimp and enforcer. The moment he laid eyes on Mutsuo, he made suggestive comments and led him to a brothel, setting the stage for a dark turn in Mutsuo's life. During a fateful encounter, Mutsuo was introduced to a world of temptation when he met Yamuchi. A young man with little life experience, Mutsuo found himself easily swayed. Following this introduction, he seemed to undergo a profound transformation. Upon his return to the village, Mutsuo became fixated on pursuing young women, yet most of them rebuffed his advances. The small village offered few households, and after repeated rejections, word of his increasingly desperate behavior spread. This relentless pursuit only served to erode Mutsuo's self-esteem. As he faced the harsh reality of his failures in courting young women, his thoughts began to darken, spiraling into troubling territory. In the rural outskirts of Japan, an ancient custom known as yobi lingered, presenting Mutsuo with an unsettling opportunity. This historical practice allowed men to secretly enter a woman's home at night for intimate encounters, provided there was mutual consent, typically involving young women or widows. In the shadows of a changing society, a clandestine practice emerged. Men would stealthily enter the homes of women under the veil of night, seeking intimate relations before slipping away with the dawn. Such encounters required mutual consent and were typically limited to young women and widows, as Japanese society wrestled with modernization. In the remote villages of Tsuyama, a long-standing tradition known as yobai endured, despite being banned in most regions. This clandestine practice thrived in the shadows, where customs were preserved and community ties were strong. Within these villages, a social organization known as wakashigumi emerged. Comprising unmarried young men, aged around 15 to 16, this group was a rite of passage. Older members guided newcomers through the intricacies of local customs, instilling discipline and community rules. Tasked with safeguarding the village, wakashigumi conducted nightly patrols, ensuring that men from outside did not infiltrate their territory to pursue local women. Their authority extended beyond mere protection. They regulated sexual relationships and marriages within the community. The wakashigumi even offered guidance to inexperienced grooms on their wedding nights, a crucial role that imbued them with a sense of power and responsibility. For many, being accepted into this brotherhood was a coveted status symbol, a mark of respect and belonging. But for Mutsuo Toi, the path to acceptance seemed forever barred. Mutsuo yearned to join the ranks of wakashigumi. Yet, his social awkwardness, frail physique, and lack of friends his age rendered him an outsider. The doors to this brotherhood were firmly shut, leaving him to devise more nefarious strategies to fulfill his desires. In the darkness of night, Mutsuo became a keen observer, studying the men who engaged in yobai. He meticulously cataloged their personalities and identified the vulnerabilities of the women they pursued. Armed with this knowledge, he resorted to blackmail and coercion, forcing women into his grasp under a shroud of manipulation. This insidious strategy allowed Mutsuo to indulge in his desires, and he repeated this pattern with alarming frequency. His perceived education and modest wealth made him somewhat appealing, and many women in the village did not outright reject him. However, the consequences of his reckless lifestyle began to take a toll. Despite his youth, Mutsuo's body could not withstand the strain. He soon began to experience alarming symptoms, persistent chest pain and coughing that filled him with dread. Convinced he was battling tuberculosis, he sought out various folk remedies, each one failing to provide relief. As despair enveloped him, Mutsuo chose to conceal his illness from everyone, continuing his affairs with the village women as if nothing were wrong. However, arrogance began to swell within him, a misguided sense of superiority that would soon lead to his downfall. But this fleeting period of indulgence was about to be shattered. In 1937, amidst Japan's tumultuous war with China, Mutsuo faced a mandatory military health examination that would change everything. Enlisting in the army was an esteemed honor, and like many young men, he yearned for that distinction. Mutsuo hoped to achieve a Class A classification during the examination, a status that would bring pride not only to himself, but to his family and village. Yet his aspirations were crushed when military doctors diagnosed him with early-stage tuberculosis, relegating him to the reserve category. This classification was a mark of disgrace. In a time when medical knowledge was limited, a tuberculosis diagnosis was tantamount to a death sentence, viewed as an incurable affliction. Mutsuo's pleas for a reevaluation fell on deaf ears, met instead with scorn from the doctors. News of Mutsuo's diagnosis spread like wildfire through the village. His frailty and the fact that both his parents had succumbed to the disease only fueled the villagers' fears. They believed tuberculosis to be both contagious and hereditary, prompting them to distance themselves from him. As the whispers of his illness grew louder, Mutsuo found himself shunned by the very community he had sought to manipulate. The women who had once been drawn to him began to sever ties one by one, leaving him isolated and embittered. His social standing, once inflated by arrogance, crumbled before his eyes. The harsh reality of his situation was closing in, and the repercussions of his actions were about to unfold in ways he could never have anticipated. With both of his parents succumbing to tuberculosis, the villagers harbored a deep-seated fear of the disease, believing it to be both contagious and hereditary. This fear transformed into ostracism as the villagers shunned Mutsuo, sealing his fate in isolation. One by one, the women who had once shared their affections with him turned their backs, severing ties as they distanced themselves from his troubled existence. The isolation deepened, and two of these women, after ending their relationships, further compounded his despair. As whispers swept through the village, false rumors began to circulate about Mutsuo Toi. This betrayal ignited a fury within him. Overnight, the warmth of community turned cold and merciless. To add to his anguish, Mutsuo grappled with the knowledge of his tuberculosis, a ticking clock that marked the limits of his time. In this suffocating isolation, despair morphed into a dark seed of vengeance in Mutsuo's heart. The desire for revenge against the entire village began to consume him. Following the end of the military draft, he found himself banned from work due to his failing health. With no other avenues left, he sought a hunting license, a decision that would change everything. Armed with this permit, he purchased a double-barreled shotgun. The following year, desperation led him to mortgage his house and farmland, borrowing 600 yen in the process. With the borrowed money, Mutsuo traveled to Kobe, Japan, where he acquired a Browning 12-gauge semi-automatic shotgun, claiming it was for hunting dangerous animals. Speculation swirled around his true motives for acquiring firearms, with two theories emerging as the most prevalent. The first theory posits that Mutsu had not yet planned to kill anyone. Instead, he sought to assert his desires, allegedly using the shotgun to intimidate women in the village and silence those who spoke ill of him. The second theory suggests that after being deemed unfit for military service, Mutsuo became a target of bullying by local thugs. To prove his strength and protect himself, he armed himself with firearms. With his new weapons, Mutsuo frequently ventured to the nearby mountains to practice shooting. After each session, he would roam the village, gun slung over his shoulder, a menacing presence that filled the villagers with fear. As his collection of weapons grew, so did his confidence, while the villagers' dread deepened. Even his grandmother, who had always spoiled him, began to regard her own grandson with caution. It was only a matter of time before a misunderstanding ignited the explosive resentment brewing within him. On March 7, 1938, his grandmother approached the local police station with alarming accusations, declaring, "My grandson poisoned my soup. He's trying to kill me." In truth, the frail woman had misunderstood Mutsuo's intentions. He had obtained herbal medicine, hoping to aid her health. However, the medicine's strong, unpleasant odor repulsed her, leading him to secretly mix it into her daily meals. That fateful day, as he added it to her soup, she caught him in the act, leading to a police investigation that ultimately deemed it a misunderstanding. Despite the resolution, Mutsuo's hunting license was revoked, and the authorities confiscated his firearms. As the village turned its back on him, the final betrayal came when even his beloved grandmother expressed suspicion. His heart hardened further. In the shadows, Mutsuo plotted his next move. Undeterred by the loss of his firearms, he turned to underground channels to secretly repurchase weapons. With 160 yen, he acquired firearms from various stores in Osaka, Kobe, and Tokushima, including a second-hand 12-gauge Browning shotgun. Along with this, he gathered 5 rounds of ammunition, gunpowder, and other supplies. From a local blacksmith, he also obtained a katana. This time, he refrained from parading his weapons around the village, choosing instead to modify his shotgun into a more lethal 9-round firearm at home. Each day, he avoided the villagers, retreating to the nearby forested mountains to train with both his shotgun and katana. The local school's frequent military drills masked the sounds of his practice, allowing Mutsuo to perfect his skills unnoticed. As May 18 approached, a sense of completion enveloped him. Every piece of his plan was falling into place. The villagers remained blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to erupt from Mutsuo Toi. In a chilling display of determination, Mutsuo Toi secretly modified his 5-round shotgun into a lethal 9-round firearm within the confines of his home. Each day, he shunned the villagers, opting instead to retreat into the nearby forested mountains, where he trained relentlessly with both his shotgun and katana, honing his skills in solitude. The sound of gunfire echoed through the village, a common background noise due to the local school's frequent military training drills. This cacophony masked Mutsuo's clandestine weapons practice, allowing his preparations to go unnoticed. On May 18, he sensed that the stage was set for his impending vengeance. In a calculated act of finality, Mutsuo Toi penned 2 lengthy letters to his sister, revealing the depths of his turmoil. Shortly after, he disposed of his notebooks, books, and personal belongings, reducing them to ashes in his yard. On the morning of May 21, he mounted his bicycle and pedaled through the familiar village roads, each turn steeped in ominous intent. Mutsuo's mind raced as he calculated the time it would take for any surviving villagers to alert authorities in case of an emergency. By around 4 p.m., he cycled through the village, deliberately noting the homes of those he bore grudges against a grim rehearsal for the impending chaos. As the clock approached 5 p.m., Mutsuo climbed a utility pole and severed the power lines. The village of Kayomura was plunged into darkness, a grim reality that mirrored wartime conditions. The power outages went unnoticed, blending seamlessly into the fabric of daily life. Time ticked away relentlessly, the darkness swallowing the remote village whole. After a laborious day, villagers returned home, children's laughter echoing through the night as families settled in, blissfully unaware of the horror that loomed just hours away. While families drifted into sleep, visions of tranquility filled their minds. The night was pitch black, with dark clouds hovering ominously, a light drizzle falling like a shroud over the unsuspecting village. Fields, villages, and mountains lay hidden beneath a vast, suffocating darkness. In this endless void, a brutal massacre was set to unfold, a nightmare that would awaken the village at 1:00 a.m. on May 21, 1938. Mutsuo's rampage commenced. Clad in a black, high-collared student uniform and wearing tightly wrapped socks and cloth around his calves, he resembled a soldier preparing for war. His head was swathed in cloth, and he had 2 flashlights affixed to either side, with a bicycle lamp illuminating his chest. Strapped to his waist was a katana and 2 daggers, while in his grip was a modified Browning shotgun, now capable of holding 9 rounds. His pockets bulged with 100 rounds of ammunition, and a fabric pouch containing an additional 100 rounds was secured to his waist. With a heart hardened by rage, he approached his first target, his own 80-year-old grandmother. Once she succumbed to a deep sleep, Mutsuo swung an axe, severing her head in a grotesque act of betrayal before discarding the weapon and stepping out into the night, ready to execute his meticulously orchestrated plan. The villagers, trusting and simple, left their doors unlocked at night, a fact that played into Matsuo's hands as he slipped silently into homes. His first destination was the residence of Kishida Kiyoi. Kiyoi, his neighbor, had passed his military conscription exam with a Class A ranking, a source of mockery for Matsuo, who felt the sting of humiliation keenly. Kiyoi's mother had once been involved with Matsuo, but had rejected him outright upon learning of his tuberculosis, spreading cruel rumors that solidified his status as an outcast. Adding to his humiliation, Kiyoi's younger sister Misa had openly ridiculed Matsuo, rejecting his advances and making him a target of laughter. As he moved through the shadows, Matsuo's wrath was only just beginning to unfold. Matsuo's neighbor, Kiyoi, had recently passed his military conscription exam with a Class A ranking, a fact that the villagers used to mock Matsuo mercilessly. Compounding the animosity was the history of Kiyoi's mother, who had once been involved with Matsuo, deepening the wounds of rivalry. The harsh truth of rejection struck Matsuo with devastating force. After discovering his tuberculosis diagnosis, she rejected him without hesitation, unleashing a torrent of malicious gossip that tarnished his already fragile reputation. Misa, Kiyoi's younger sister, added to his humiliation by publicly ridiculing his yobai advances. As his resentment festered, Matsuo's hatred for the entire Kishida family deepened. Under the cover of night, he infiltrated their home, opting to forgo his firearm to avoid drawing attention. Instead, he unsheathed his katana, delivering a fatal blow to Kiyoi's mother, who lay unsuspecting in her sleep. The chilling sound of violence stirred Kiyoi's two younger brothers from their slumber in the adjacent room. Without a moment's hesitation, Matsuo stormed in, mercilessly slaughtering both children. Fortunately for him, Kiyoi's sister Misa was not at home that night. Matsuo surmised that in the midst of the silkworm farming season, she was likely laboring overnight at another household in the village. Rather than searching for her, he turned his focus to the nearby residence of Nishikawa Eiji. Matsuo had engaged in multiple encounters with Eiji's wife, Nishikawa Tomomi, but their affair had soured after she learned of his illness, leading her to sever ties and make him the subject of scorn throughout the village. Upon learning of his illness, she abruptly severed all ties with him, spreading tales that turned him into a laughingstock within the village. Just before this, Tomomi had humiliated Matsuo in public, igniting a fire of hatred within him that would drive him to massacre the entire village. This moment of public shame became a pivotal factor in his twisted decision. Breaking into Nishikawa Eiji's house, Matsuo startled Tomomi from her sleep. As she instinctively opened her mouth to scream, he silenced her with a gunshot to the stomach. The sound echoed through the night, waking 3 others from their slumber. Tomomi's husband, Nishikawa Eiji, their eldest daughter, Yoshiko, and Tomomi's younger sister, Chizuko, rushed into the room. Yoshiko had a history with Matsuo, having engaged in yobai with him, but she had just recently married. Matsuo had returned home only the day before. This familiarity with the neighborhood made that night the perfect opportunity for revenge. Hearing the gunfire, the 3 rushed out, but one by one, they fell victim to Matsuo's relentless assault. After slaughtering the Nishikawa family, Matsuo trudged through the muddy village path, his mind now set on his next target, the home of Yasuda Ryu. Although Ryu had no personal vendetta against Matsuo, his wife Kiyoi was the second daughter of Nishikawa Eiji, sealing their fate. Upon breaking into their home, Matsuo fired at Yasuda Ryu at close range, then turned to Kiyoi, who was 6 months pregnant, showing no mercy. Also present in the room was Kuma, Yasuda Ryu's nephew, who had come to help with farm work. Hearing the gunshots, Kuma instinctively reached for the door to investigate. But before he could react, Matsuo struck him down with the butt of his gun, then shot him in the chest. As he prepared to leave, Matsuo noticed Yasuda Ryu's 70-year-old mother hiding in the shadows. Without uttering a word, he fired a shot into her chest and walked away, leaving her fate to chance. Miraculously, the bullet missed any vital organs. She would later be rescued by the police, but by now Matsuo had already claimed 11 lives, yet the massacre was far from finished. Exiting Yasuda Ryu's home, he moved on towards the residence of Yoisei, a 60-year-old man. The Yoisei family included 5 members, one of whom was Yuriko. Yuriko had once been Matsuo's classmate and was said to be the woman he loved the most. After losing his virginity at a brothel, Mutsuo sought to initiate a relationship with her, only to be met with rejection. Subsequently, her parents arranged her marriage to Okuni Ryoku Gyoku, a man from the same village. However, before the wedding, Mutsuo tricked her and violated her, causing deep rifts in her relationship with her husband. Before long, Yuriko found herself divorced. After her divorce, her mother arranged for her to marry a man in a distant village. This only fueled Mutsuo's resentment towards her family. Just 2 days before the massacre, Yuriko had returned to visit her elderly parents, unknowingly becoming the catalyst for Mutsuo Toi's horrific plans. It was on this fateful night that Mutsuo chose to exact his revenge. His first target was Yoichi, Yuriko's father. In a brutal instant, he shot him dead, sending shockwaves of panic through the household. As chaos erupted, Yuriko's younger brother Makoto and his wife, Saika, were gunned down in the yard while attempting to flee. Her younger sisters, Koichi and Koana, leaped out of a window in terror. But as they reached the hallway, Mutsuo shot them both, leaving them to bleed out on the floor. Miraculously, Yuriko managed to escape, sprinting in sheer panic toward the nearby home of Nishikawa Shigesawa. Later, she recounted the horror of that night, describing how she fled from her father's house, witnessing her siblings slaughtered. As she ran into the night, she could feel Mutsuo's gaze upon her, a predator stalking its prey. He had marked her as his primary target. There was no way he would allow her to escape. Immediately, he chased after her, following her to Nishikawa Shigesawa's home, located at the heart of the village. As soon as Yuriko dashed inside and bolted the doors, the nightmare was far from over. The Shigesawa family, too, reinforced their doors against the chaos outside. Inside, 4 individuals were nestled in slumber, oblivious to the mounting tension. Mutsuo arrived moments later, consumed by fury. He kicked at the door in a violent frenzy. In a fit of rage, he unleashed gunfire upon the entrance, desperate to break in, but the sturdy door held firm against his onslaught. Just as he teetered on the brink of defeat, the commotion stirred Genji Shigesawa's 84-year-old father, who had been peacefully sleeping in an adjacent room. Stepping outside to investigate the disturbance, the elderly man encountered Mutsuo's wrath. 2 shots rang out, silencing him instantly. Later, investigators would discover that Genji had fought back, attempting to reason with Mutsuo in a futile struggle. In a desperate act of defiance, Genji had even grasped Mutsuo's katana with his left hand, leaving behind a deep wound as testament to his bravery in the face of death. The chaos at Nishikawa Shigesawa's house reverberated through the neighborhood, awakening several households. Mutsuo had never truly harbored a deep grudge against the Shigesawa family. His rage was fueled solely by Yuriko's refuge in their home, a fact that would lead to unimaginable tragedy. Realizing that the fortified house was beyond his reach, Mutsu turned his gaze to the next target. Yoi Koji and his mother Toyo lay fast asleep, blissfully unaware of the impending carnage that awaited outside. Toyo had once been entangled in a relationship with Mutsuo, adding a layer of complexity to his murderous intent. In a devastating turn of events, Toyo had initially accepted payment from Mutsuo Toi for their encounters. However, when she suddenly severed all ties, Mutsuo's world shattered. An investigation led him to a bitter discovery. Toyo had begun a relationship with a wealthier man in the village. Consumed by humiliation and betrayal, Mutsuo's resentment deepened. Driven by a profound grudge, Mutsuo broke into their home and shot both Koji and Toyo, ending their lives with merciless precision. At this juncture, the death toll had reached a staggering 19 victims, yet Mutsuo's rampage showed no indication of slowing. He swiftly proceeded to the residence of Nishikawa Chihiro, a silk farmer. Although this family had never wronged him, Mutsuo harbored suspicions that Misa, the daughter of his first victim, was working there. Furthermore, Gayu, the younger sister of Okuni Ryoku Gyoku, Yuriko's ex-husband, was also employed in the household. Mutsuo's sinister objective was to eliminate both women. As he surveyed the area, he confirmed that Misa and Gayu were asleep in the silkworm farming house. With stealth, he climbed over the fence, slipped into their quarters, and coldly executed them both. Also in the same room was Nishikawa Kazuha, the eldest son of Nishikawa Chihiro, who fell victim to Mutsuo's wrath. Afterward, Mutsuo entered the main house, aimed his gun at Nishikawa Chihiro's head, and chillingly declared, "You never spoke ill of me, so I won't kill you." With those words, he left, leaving a trail of horror in his wake. In the dimly lit room, Nishikawa Kazuha, the eldest son of the murdered Nishikawa Chihiro, sat in a state of dread. Suddenly, Mitsuo Toi stormed into the main house, his gun drawn, and aimed it directly at Nishikawa Chihiro's head. With a chilling calmness, he uttered words that would haunt the village forever. "You never spoke ill of me." In a chilling moment, he had spared Nishikawa Chihiro's life, declaring, "So I won't kill you." But the reprieve was short-lived as he crossed the fields toward the home of Okuni Ryoku Gyoku, the man who had once taken the woman Mitsuo loved most. Meanwhile, Okuni Ryoku Gyoku had sensed that something was terribly amiss. Just as he stepped outside to report the escalating violence to the police, Mitsuo spotted him. Fortunately, Okuni had been on high alert and narrowly escaped the line of fire, sprinting away just in time. However, his 47-year-old mother remained inside the house. Enraged by Okuni's escape, Mitsuo turned his gun on her, sneering, "That woman, Giyu, is already dead by my hand. Now it's your turn." He unleashed a barrage of gunfire. Though none of the bullets struck vital organs, she ultimately succumbed to her injuries later at the hospital. Meanwhile, Okuni Ryoku Gyoku, having narrowly escaped the massacre, fled for his life to the police station in a nearby town. As he relayed the horrifying details of the rampage, law enforcement immediately sprang into action, dispatching officers to Kiyomura. By this point, Mitsuo's killing spree had persisted for nearly an hour. Yet, his thirst for violence remained unquenched. He made his way to the northern part of the village, heading toward the home of Aikazawa Mizuno. Mitsuo held a deep animosity toward Mizuno's younger sister, Matsuko, due to her secret relationship with him. By this time, Mitsuo's violent rampage had stretched nearly an hour, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. Yet, his thirst for vengeance was far from quenched. He pressed on to the northern part of the village, his sights set on Aikazawa Mizuno's home. Mitsuo's heart burned with a deeply rooted hatred for Mizuno's younger sister, Matsuko, who had once harbored a secret relationship with him. Behind closed doors, Matsuko had mocked Mitsuo. Yet, in a chilling confession, he had warned her, "I'm going to die from tuberculosis anyway. I might as well go out with a bang before I go." His ominous words sent a shiver down Matsuko's spine, filling her with terror. Fearing for her safety, she gathered her belongings and fled to Kyoto just 3 days before the massacre. This fateful decision spared her life, as she was not home when the horrific events unfolded. Tragically, her family would not share her fortune. In the quiet Aikazawa household, 7 lives intertwined. Aikazawa Mizuno, the head of the family, his 34-year-old wife, his elderly parents, both aged 74, their 2 sons, and their youngest daughter, a 5-year-old girl, all nestled in the embrace of slumber. Unbeknownst to them, their remote home lay far from the village center, shielding them from the chaos that had erupted. When Mitsuo arrived, the family remained blissfully unaware, still lost in their dreams. In a horrifying act, Mitsuo took the lives of Mizuno's parents. His rampage escalated as he targeted Mizuno's wife and their young daughter. For reasons lost to madness, he unleashed a particularly brutal attack on the innocent girl, shooting her 3 times in the stomach. After leaving a trail of devastation at the Aikazawa home, Mitsuo stormed toward his next target, the residence of Kurikawa Zoe. Kurikawa Zoe, a 61-year-old man, stood as the wealthiest and most influential figure in the village. Known for his numerous affairs, he became a source of envy for Mitsuo, who seethed at the thought of Zoe's charmed life. Upon arrival, Mitsuo found Zoe and his 56-year-old wife still awake. In a desperate bid to protect herself, Zoe's wife rushed to close the window. But Mitsuo fired a shot, striking her arm and severing an artery, as Zoe remained upstairs, blissfully unaware of the impending horror. Though Zoe himself evaded injury, his wife was rushed to the hospital, where she succumbed to her injuries due to excessive blood loss. By this grim juncture, Mitsuo had nearly obliterated all those he held a grudge against in Kiyomura. His next and final target lay in the neighboring village of Hanpan-mura, Okamoto Kazuo, a 51-year-old man. Kazuo's 32-year-old wife, Umashiro, had once shared a forbidden liaison with Mitsuo. Her betrayal had ignited a firestorm of rage within him. Consumed by jealousy, Kazuo began to secretly follow Umashiro at night, leading her to sever ties with Mitsuo. This rejection filled him with fury, culminating in a brutal invasion of their home, where he unleashed a barrage of bullets, killing both Kazuo and his wife instantly. At 3:00 a.m. on May 21 Est 1938, the police finally arrived at the blood-soaked village, greeted by horrifying scenes of carnage. Meanwhile, Mutsuo had found refuge in a farmhouse approximately zero point 0.6 miles from the village, leaving terror in his wake. The family residing there trembled at the sight of Mutsuo, his body drenched in blood. Among them was a young boy who often listened to Mutsuo's tales. In a chilling encounter, Mutsuo borrowed a pencil and paper from the frightened child. Before vanishing into the night, he left the boy with an unsettling message: study hard, and one day you will achieve great things. With that, Mutsuo slipped away, still armed and dangerous, leaving authorities in a state of alarm. A massive search operation was initiated, with police and local militias scouring the area for the fugitive. The following morning, they discovered Mutsuo's lifeless body atop a mountain ridge, approximately 2.2 miles from the scene of the massacre. From this vantage point, he had a full view of Kiyomura. Beside him lay a neatly arranged collection of items: a letter, a flashlight, his katana, his shotgun, and personal belongings, all telling a story of finality. The evidence suggested a tragic end. Mutsuo had placed the gun against his chest and used his toe to pull the trigger. Authorities estimated his time of death to be approximately 3 hours after the massacre had concluded. In total, Mutsuo had invaded 11 homes, mercilessly slaughtering 30 people and severely injuring 3 others. Among the deceased were 5 innocent children, each under the age of 16. The staggering number of victims left nearly all survivors connected to those who were lost. Those women who once held relationships with Mutsuo Toi either denied any association or had already passed away. As a result, many details surrounding this grisly case remain shrouded in mystery. The exact motive behind Mutsuo's horrific massacre continues to elude investigators to this day. The reasons behind Mutsuo's brutal slaughter of his own neighbors remain a dark enigma. Perhaps the only glimpse into his twisted psyche lies within the letters he left at the crime scene and the poignant note addressed to his sister, Minako, prior to the massacre. The contents of the note found at the scene reveal Mutsuo's torment. Before I die, there are a few things I must say. Grandmother, I am truly sorry. I should not have killed you. I thought I would die silently. But I have committed too many cruel acts. Sister, please forgive me. I am an unworthy brother for having done something so monstrous. I long to run freely across the fields, but for the past 4 years, since falling ill, I have faced scorn from everyone. Society must be more accepting of those who suffer from tuberculosis. I have lived an unhappy life. If there is a next life, I wish to be strong and happy. The reason I acted tonight is because of Nishikawa. In a haunting revelation, Mutsuo confessed to having let Uriko and Nishikawa Yoshiko escape. He felt compelled to tell his sister, "You must kill her." He harbored deep resentment toward Kurakawa Zoe, the man who exploited his wealth and power to abuse women in the village. With dawn approaching, he knew he had to leave. 2 more letters emerged from Mutsuo's home, lengthy documents that detailed his life story and the motivations behind his actions. At the conclusion of the letters, he expressed a wish for his sister Minako to find happiness. Tragically, not long after the massacre, Minako succumbed to tuberculosis in December 1939, over a year after the horrific event. The Okama District Court released an official report on the Tsuyama massacre. This report, compiled by the Criminal Affairs Bureau of the Japanese Ministry of Justice, now resides in the archives at Stanford University in the United States. The final report concluded that Mutsuo's actions were born from a life steeped in isolation and rejection. The cold treatment he received from villagers festered resentment and hatred within him, ultimately pushing him to feel trapped and desperate. In a quest for revenge, he chose the most violent path imaginable. Technically, the massacre did not occur within the confines of Tsuyama City itself. However, as time passed, the village where the massacre unfolded was absorbed into Tsuyama, leading to the event's classification as the Tsuyama incident. The tragedy is also known as the Mutsuo Toi case. Although it garnered significant media attention, Japan was embroiled in war with China at the time. The military government sought to suppress public awareness of such a heinous act of mass murder. Driven by resentment over his rejection from the army, and in an effort to stave off public panic, newspapers heavily censored their reports. Most victims' names were altered or omitted entirely. The massacre left an indelible scar on the community of Kiyomura. The village, home to only a handful of households, primarily depended on farming. The sudden loss of so many workers devastated the community. In the years that followed, many villagers abandoned their homes, unable to bear the weight of what had transpired. The once vibrant village, now haunted by tragedy, became desolate and empty. More than 80 years have passed, yet even today, locals remain reluctant to speak of the events that unfolded that fateful night. Gravestones still bear the date of May 21 Steve, Eshway 13, 1938. Beside the grave of Mutsuo's grandmother lies a round stone, a silent marker for his unmarked resting place. The Tsuyama Massacre later inspired several literary works. Among these are the Tsuyama Massacre of 30 people by Namba Asayo and Yatsuka Village by Yokozaki Kenshi. The case has also been adapted into films, and its impact is evident in various video games. When a person's self-esteem is shattered, they cling to the hope of restoration. Yet, when that hope extinguishes, darkness envelops them. People often refer to the last straw, but the truth is, what shatters the glass is not merely the final drop. It is the weight of all the drops that came before it. Thus, the tale of Mutsuo Toi and the Tsuyama Massacre reaches its grim conclusion, a brutal tragedy that cast a long shadow over the once idyllic rural village. Mutsuo Toi, who once enjoyed a life of wealth and affection, metamorphosed into a harbinger of death and destruction. What precipitated this transformation? Was it merely the rejection and cold indifference of the villagers? Or were there deeper wounds hidden beneath the surface, wounds we may never fully grasp? Some perceive Mutsuo as a victim of fate, afflicted by a cruel illness, and burdened by society's relentless stigma, a childhood marred by misfortune and the loss of both parents at a tender age. Family abandonment left his psyche deeply scarred. The inability to pursue his education, a series of romantic rejections, and the ridicule stemming from his illness, these experiences sliced into his self-worth like 1,000 knives. Pushed to the brink of despair, one might argue that Mutsuo elicits more pity than blame. Yet others cast him as an irredeemable monster, a cold-blooded murderer who opted to extinguish the lives of 30 innocent souls, including the elderly, a pregnant woman, and defenseless children. No amount of suffering could ever justify such an act of brutality. His selfishness and blind hatred transformed him into something monstrous. The Tsuyama Massacre is not merely a tale of crime. It serves as a mirror reflecting the harsh societal issues that plagued Japan at the time. Stigmas surrounding illness, deep-rooted inequalities, and archaic traditions formed the backdrop of this tragedy. It compels us to question society's responsibilities and how we treat those among us, especially the vulnerable and the marginalized. Perhaps the most poignant lesson from this harrowing story is the power of compassion, understanding, and human connection. We must never let indifference and coldness drive someone to the brink. A simple act of kindness could alter the trajectory of a life. Let us strive for a society that embodies care, support, and inclusivity. Above all, we must cherish and value life, for once it is lost, nothing can ever restore it. That concludes today's video. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one. Goodbye.